Hello scientists and welcome to our lab. Today we will be showing a demonstration that involves physics, a book, a car, a balloon, and some string. This demonstration would be an introduction to balanced and unbalanced forces within a unit on motion and stability. This demonstration can be used in grades 3 to 5 to model the effects of balanced and unbalanced forces on an object. The performance expectation from the next generation science standards we will be addressing is from the Motions and Stability Forces and Interaction Standard. The performance standard calls for planning and conducting an investigation to provide evidence on the effects of unbalanced and balanced forces on an object. One disciplinary core idea, or DCI, for this standard is forces in motion. This DCI says that by the end of the unit, students should be able to understand that each force acts on one particular object and has both strength and a direction. An object at rest typically has multiple forces acting on it, but they add to give zero net force on the object. Forces that do not sum to zero can cause changes in the object's speed or direction of motion. Going back to the performance expectation, let's take some time to go over some important concepts. First, balanced and unbalanced forces are all around us. An object that is not moving, what we call at rest, has at least two forces acting on it. Even though we cannot see the object moving, it is being held in place by two forces, the force of gravity and normal force. The force of gravity equates to about 9.8 meters per second squared and is consistently applied to all objects in Earth, including us. This is what keeps us anchored to the ground while objects in space with a weaker gravitational strength float around relatively freely. The normal force exerted on an object is exuded perpendicularly to the object. In simpler terms, it comes from whatever the object is resting on. Now let's take a look at this book on the table. It is not moving, but what forces are acting on the book? That's right, the force of gravity and the normal force from the table. Let's make a quick scientific diagram to demonstrate our understanding of these forces. The book here is resting on the table. We know that the force of gravity is keeping the book from floating into space, so it must be pulling us downward. We will draw an arrow from the book pointing down to represent this force in our diagram. We know that the normal force from the table is holding the book up, so we will make an arrow going in the opposite direction from the book. It is important to remember that since the book is at rest, the forces acting on it are balanced, so we must make our arrows about the same length to represent the strength of each force. Now let's take a closer look at unbalanced forces. Picture a car driving down the road. Since this car exists on Earth, we know that there are at least two forces acting on it at any moment, gravitational and normal. However, the car is in motion. That means that there are other forces acting on it that will allow the car to drive along the street. If you take a look at any road, you will notice that the surface of a road has a pretty rough texture. This is what allows you to drive in slippery conditions without driving off the road. It also acts as a third source of force, the force of friction. Although usually small, this force is exerted in the opposite direction that your car is driving. Because our car is driving down the street, we know that there is at least one force acting on your car. This force is the applied force, which changes as you speed up or slow down your car. We know that this applied force must be much greater than the force of friction because the friction on the road is not strong enough to stop your car from moving forward. Now let's make another scientific diagram to show the forces acting on this car. We already know to add arrows for gravity and normal force, but what about our other forces? Well, since our car is moving toward the right, the force of friction is acting in the opposite direction. We will make this arrow similar in size to the normal and gravitational forces. Because our car is moving to the right, we know that the applied force is acting in that direction. Since the car is moving in that direction, the applied force must be greater than all the other forces. So we have to make this arrow longer than the others to show that the car will be acting in response to this force more than the other three. Now let's get to that balloon and string we were talking about. If we were to take this balloon with strings tied to either end, we can see the balanced and unbalanced forces acting on it. If two scientists are holding the strings at either end without pulling on it, the balloon does not move. This means that the force from gravity, the table, and both scientists holding are equal and balanced. But if one scientist begins to pull on the string, the balloon will move towards the scientist, creating an applied force. This applied force throws off the balance of forces on the object, making it unbalanced. However, if the other scientist pulls the string with the same force, the forces will become balanced once again. I hope you enjoyed our visit to our lab. Come back soon to learn more about science.